along the Pleasant Run Greenway, which is the Pleasant Run Trail. So when people bike or ride or jog along, you know, you can see the water because that's very important. And I do know an organization that is working with that is ROW, Reconnecting to Our Waterway. Not with the invasive removal, but I'd like to have a 2 or 4 year event where we connect all the neighborhoods. We have a walk and a roll event every 2 or 4 years, and then have like a big celebration. Like 2 years have a celebration at Christian Park, then the next 2 years have a big celebration at Ellenberg Park, then have another one at Garfield Park. You know, different. I wonder who do I approach to help me organize this and everything. You know, get a group of people. Who should I approach?
Have you had any conversations with Keep Indianapolis Beautiful?
No.
That would be my first place that I would recommend to start, because that's one of the things we're working on as their piece of ROW is invasive removal. So I would start right there with Keep Indianapolis Beautiful.
Is there a certain person that I should talk at request?
I think you would want to talk to Mark Adler.
And hopefully that will connect with other people and get a
Yeah,
good.
and they'll be able to say exactly what their role is and how you might go next.
I mean, so I think it's a great idea, first of all. So invasive removal is really important. I know that Lily Day of Service, through Reconnecting to Our Waterways, did do a lot of invasive removal along Pleasant Run already and in some other parts of the city, and they want to keep doing that. So I know that that's ongoing, so maybe making sure that connected to ROW, which you already are, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other piece would be Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, and then there's 2 other entities that, so there's the Parks Department that I think manages the trails, and then there's the Parks Foundation, which is independent, and then there's the Greenways Foundation, which is a different foundation. They both have some say over the Pleasant Run SWAT that you're talking about. So those would be 2. So Lori Hazlitt at the Parks Foundation would be, or Jenny Burrow at the Parks Foundation would be a good contact. The Greenways Foundation is Allison, she just changed her last name, Mitchell? Yeah, it used to be Humphrey and now it's Mitchell. So that would be another good contact.
I'm going to correct something.
Yes.
The trails are managed by the Department of Public Works. So don't call the Parks Department for that. And you would just probably have to call DPW's main number and say who is responsible for the maintenance. So they maintain all of the parks, and the parks just plans them and manages them. And then I have sort of an additional answer. So Meridian Park neighborhood, Doug, who I cannot remember his last name. Doug Day, thank you, I knew somebody would help me. Doug Day was where you are now about 5 years ago with getting stuff happening on Fall Creek. And I worked with him a lot, and they just had an event like last weekend there, and they got all that honeysuckle cleaned out. So Doug Day from Meridian Park,
And they presented a workshop today. Somebody else engaged as part of that. Lee Riley Evans at the CDC, Mapleton Fall Creek, CDC.
So who at DPW would she talk to?
I don't know the person, it would just be maintenance at DPW.
Okay. Actually, I would say that, does anybody else have a better answer than we just came up with? The whole idea that we're experts up here, and it really...
I think Doug Day was a good idea. Yes, exactly right. Doug Day was exactly where you were 5 years ago, and Destination Fall Creek is thriving.
Yeah, and you can contact Mapleton Fall Creek Development Corporation, who is there.
I was going to say, the Marion County Soil and Water Conservation, we've worked, I don't know if we're in the park area, but we've worked with them in our neighborhood to do projects. Sometimes they have grant funds to do different projects, either as an organization or as an individual, so that would be a great resource.
Soil and water.
Marion County Soil and Water Conservation.
Before we go to our next question, who had the cards filled out for their neighborhood, and BJ will come around and pick them up? There's 2 or 3, I think, out there. Raise your hand if you have one. There's 1 or 2 others. Anybody else have a card they want to fill out for their neighborhood?
Thank you.
You want to fill a card out for your neighborhood? Do you have any questions, Wade? Your neighborhood, you want to fill out for? Okay. The next one is Richard Arnold.
If I could, before you go to the next question, Lee, you missed
Yeah.
the first person, the question with regard to getting invasives removed along Pleasant Run, and we were discussing how Doug Day and you had worked really hard and had some success, and you told her that you would maybe be one of the connections.
The destination Fall Creek.
The destination Fall Creek, yes.
Yes.
Lee Riley Evans.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Richard Arnold with Castleton Estate Homeowners. That might, I think it's the guy came in and he walked downstairs. Okay. Next left. Okay. Judith Essex,
Okay.
Old South Side.
Old Town Side, that's right. If our CDC did not receive funding for home renovation and home ownership project, are there other sources of money that's available?
Probably not. So remember, I'm answering from the city, so there's other grants probably that you can apply for that aren't city related. The city funding is all, that she's talking about is all HUD funding that goes through the city, and the city each year has, a proposal response period, many CDCs do get it, has worked on that. But it's all very limited funding, and that will also, it's mayor related, meaning they have policies on how they want to do it. So next year, depending on who the mayor is, watch very closely and see how their policies are on how to apply to the city for that money, because they might have different priorities than like Mayor Ballard.
Was that the CDBG money?
All of that, CDBG, home, 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 emergency shelter grant, that's called something else now that I can't remember. Is
that collaborative care?
What?
That's not collaborative care, is it?
I think it's still ESG,
Yeah.
emergency shelter, and then the housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. Those are the 4 funds.
Does IHP offer anything?
So depending on which CDC you're talking about, we have a grant program. We provide operating support to CDCs and nonprofits across Marion County. So it's likely that they may have applied and may be eligible to get some grant funds. That helps them with the operation of their business. Doesn't necessarily address exactly what you're talking about. It just depends on what awards they got from the city to do particular activities in different neighborhoods. So it really depends on if that CDC received any funds from us, and if that was going to allow them to be able to do the work in there.
Judith, was your question really around how to get homeowner repairs done in my neighborhood?
Not homeowner repair. We had picked out 2 houses for renovation for new homeowners, and fix that up and have a
So that's-
new homeowner in the
So that's
neighborhood.
acquisition rehab, I guess.
Yes, rehab.
Okay.
Yes. And so, same answer then for rehab.
Same answer there. Yeah, they would potentially get operating support grants, but whether or not they have the actual funding to be able to then take those houses and move forward. So there's 2 pieces to it. One, funds to be able to operate, which is where we would come into play. Then the other is subsidies to be able to do the actual renovations of those properties, and that's where oftentimes the city grants come in or the federal grants come into play. So there's another grant called the Housing Trust Fund, City of Indianapolis Housing Trust Fund, that they could potentially apply for, but it depends on each year. There's a priority given for those Housing Trust Fund awards, and it would depend on if homeowner repair or rehab would be a priority for the Housing Trust Fund for the next round. So check with that particular CDC to see if they've applied for that as well.
I was gonna say if you're individual and they needed help, there's a 203K loan where they help them with the construction. But they loan, there's a refinance they could do, or they could do a 203 that will help them fix the house up.
So what she's talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are individual tools, if you're an individual, to get some, buy a house, finance the acquisition and the rehab of it. There are some tools and lending tools that INHP has. As an organization, it's a little bit different. I was going to say that what immediately came to my mind in terms of acquisition, homeowner repair is, there's an organization called Rebuilding Together, that if you're looking at once a year, a lot of folks come together and do a lot of homeowner repair in one location. It's called Rebuilding Together. They pick a different location every year. You can kind of start courting them and get them on the roster for your neighborhood. All of you could, and they go around.
What was that called again?
Rebuilding Together. And then Habitat for Humanity has started doing some homeowner repair as well. And so that's another resource maybe for your neighborhood. So they're citywide.
If Habitat did it, they would want to buy or have that property donated to them. They do it only on properties they don't own.
Well, is Habitat doing Brush with Kindness again?
Say that again?
Because Habitat had a program called Brush with Kindness, which was in the neighborhoods that they operated in, but in homes that they didn't.
They do they still have that, I believe.
Okay, so that might be a possibility.
That's usually, Brush with Kindness is where someone lives in the house.
But not necessarily Habitat client, is it?
Right.
Okay.
But if Habitat's gonna do a rehab of a house, it'd be one that they own.
Sure.
And that they could sell to one of,
One of their
there's
clients.
a home ownership program, so they would wanna have a buyer for that house, which is a good thing for the neighborhood. But yeah, they wouldn't do it for your CDC and then have the CDC sell it. And then I mentioned Treasured Homes is you should Google Treasured Homes. They're a group that on their own bought some houses, very few houses on the east side, and rehabbed them on their own as a neighborhood and sold them. So you might just talk to them about, see, how'd you do it? How hard was it? What'd you learn? That kind of stuff.
And the last question, so I know that Riley was working with you guys.
Yes, they're our fiscal agent.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's, can they, I mean, I would think that Riley has the capacity to be able to answer this question in a meaningful way.
Well, I just knew that we didn't get any money in this last go-around, and so I haven't discussed it with them, so I thought I'd ask you.
Okay.
Because I just got that news a few days ago. Thank you.
Cat, Keystone Monar.
I'm with the Keystone Monar Neighborhood Partnership, and my question has to do with buildings, not houses, but business structures that I don't think they're abandoned, they're vacant. And some have been vacant for a very long while. And so my question had to do with if there's any kind of program or funding resources available for neighborhood groups to rehab them and make a community center out of them, or attract some kind of business, survival business to get in there. And some of them, I think, probably need to be raised. One I went by the other day, in fact, the whole front end looks like it's just slowly caving in.
Where are we looking at? What's the?
This is going to be in 46th Street. Most of them are going to be centered around 46th and Evanston. And there's also one at Crestview and 46th.
Well, if there's funds available, it's the funds that we just talked about that are very limited, and you would have to tie, your neighborhood group would have to tie with a not-for-profit. You don't have a CDC there, but
No, we don't.
but some sort of not-for-profit, and have a specific project to apply for. And it's a kind of an annual thing, and like I said, a different mayor might have a different program, but it's an annual thing, so, you'd want to contact, right now it's Jennifer Colts in the city of Indianapolis. She can tell you about the different programs that are available to apply for, so that's one thing. Then the other, you didn't really ask this, but if if the buildings are falling down or have health issues with them, you would want to talk to the Department of Code Enforcement, and they would come and inspect it and probably cite the owner if there's problems. But that's how you would do enforcement of what.
I'd like a little clarification, because she was asking about housing.
Those funds can go for other things than
Oh, they
housing.
can.
Not home funds, but CDBG can go for other things than
Okay.
housing, yeah. And that's where Jenny Foltz could really kind of outline all of the different fundings and what they can be used for.
And what department do you know?
Department of Metropolitan Development, and just go online for the number. Again, I only know my personal number, which you can't call anymore. And I know the planning number
It's
too.
327 something.
5899.
5899, thank you.
So I would think that the most likely scenario for that is, so you have, if you identify a building, and then you still need somebody with capacity, a developer, either for-profit or nonprofit, that wants to do something and has an end use for those buildings, right? That,
I'm thinking Northeast Corridor.
so the Northeast Corridor has two CDCs that maybe could play a role, King Park Area Development Corporation and United Northeast CDC.
Right.
But, so a scenario would be, okay, they package up some vision for that, those properties, something to do with them, and then use, maybe it's multifamily housing with some mixed use, maybe it's a mixed use commercial, whatever. LISC could potentially lend on that if the project penciled out in terms of the underwriting, but in terms of our loan requirements. I think the city of Indianapolis could also lend on it. There's a Section 108 loan that's potential that could be used. And the city of Indianapolis CDBG dollars could potentially be deployed if it's around, if it's creating jobs, the different criteria that Jenny Foltz would let you know about. So I mean, that's kind of how that would shape up. And so it really is somebody with capacity. It could be a for-profit developer too. So in that area, maybe it would be BWI, Gary Hobbs, might be interested in that, those projects. BWI. He's doing a project right there on 38th and Fall Creek, so
Okay.
it's relatively in the same area, so, yeah. Oh, I was going to mention, I think so Renew Indianapolis, there's the hardest hit funds, and I don't know enough about these statewide, but there are some, for demolition, if some of those buildings just need to come down, I think there's I don't know enough about it, but there's funds available right now through the state. They're called hardest hit funds, and I think locally they've been deployed through.
They are. Renew Indianapolis is the land bank. But I kind of was thinking it was only for
Is it only
housing,
residential?
but I'm not positive about that.
I thought there was two tracks.
Katie Brett is the director of Renew Indianapolis. Either anyone else remember?
He's got something to add to
I
that.
was going to say, it's for funding that's less than 4 units, and so it's
Okay.
primarily residential.
That's what I thought it was something.
Thank you.
That's residential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Francina Peterson from Hallville.
So, for the historical, how do you, criteria, a historical home, and, with that, how do you get funding to renovate or whatever is needed to, renovate a historical home once you define that?
So are you asking about designations for
Yeah,
historic home or a district or?
all of that. I know, my home was built in 1901, and I'm outside that historical preservation that was already registered in our neighborhood. So how do I get in that umbrella of the historical homes?
Well, you ask a lot of questions. I'm going to answer your first one.
Okay.
Answer your first one first. There isn't any money for restoring historical homes.
Okay.
There's no local money for doing that. Let's put it that way. There's no local money for that. So the historic districts in Indianapolis are created through the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission, which is a DMD agency, but it's authorized by the state. And neighborhoods work with them, work together, submit a petition to the IHBC offices, and the offices then create a plan, and it's kind of a lengthy process, and it's a public hearing process, to create the historic district. And administrator of that is David Baker at IHBC. I do know his number, I know a number, 327-4409.
Presented a workshop today.
Yeah, he did IHBC 101 or something. Now, what it doesn't provide any financing, but what it does, it provides protection of the historic resources. There's different kinds of districts. There's a conservation district, which is a kind of very general historic district, or a historic district which is more restrictive. And what you are assured of then is like, you have review of demolitions, the staff has review of different additions, so studies have shown, economic studies have shown that historic districts, the property values are more stable and often higher than non-historic districts of similar. So that's what your benefit would be at being a historic district. 327-4409. That may be the only number I remember today. Hopefully not, but see, when you have your little computers and stuff, you don't have to remember numbers anymore.
So this may not apply to your like specific circumstance, Nashida, but there are historic tax credits available at the national level, and sometimes developers can put together a deal that involves low-income tax credits or historic tax credits. So if a project is deemed of historic value and there's a certain criteria for that, they might be able to get these historic tax credits and help with the deal. And the best resource for that probably locally would be Landmarks Foundation. They would understand how to navigate that.
There's
Connie Ziegler would be another great resource. Yeah.
There's I don't know that they have lots of experience. Are you familiar with historic urban neighborhoods of Indianapolis? Just all the different neighborhoods. Do they get together quarterly with Landmarks? And I saw that, like Lorraine Babel, who's former president, was here earlier today. That's some folks that are definitely knowledgeable about their own experiences individually as a homeowner and in the larger neighborhood.
Check out that, Cooney?
Yeah.
Historic urban neighborhoods of Indianapolis.
Anybody, White River State Park? Somebody online registered with that name? Anybody from the Warfleet neighborhood? And I think at this point we've got everyone in the room. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? And maybe the family can share it? Yes.
You forgot mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm Leah McCall from Week Here. Probably nobody has an answer to my question, but I asked it everywhere I go. How we can make CSX responsible for their own properties.
There's probably a reason why you haven't got an answer for that.
CSX.
I'll defer to So unfortunately, the root of that, I'll answer it, but the root of that, the problem with that question is that railroads, because of the way that they were developed, they actually created their own kingdoms, if you will. They have rights.
And they all think they're
that supersede essentially the state rights of Indiana. They have their own rights. It's very similar to how in the West there's water rights. So in Colorado and other places, well, railroads have similar statutory.
So they do not have anybody they have to answer
So
to?
they are to a higher power. It's very difficult. But I think there have been some circumstances where we've been able to work with the railroads, and I know you guys are working a little bit
I've been
right
working
there
for
on
10
that.
years on it, and I'm not getting anywhere.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is just, I know 10 years is a long time, don't give up, because you might find someone at CSX that will help.
Well, I thought I'd get a couple months ago, because I got a real person and a body and everything. But we didn't, that was the end of it. Lost it.
But once you get a person like that,
Yeah.
they will be the most helpful. Yeah, the city doesn't really have anything we can do about it.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
It is.
Although occasionally the city can acquire some CSX right away and make things happen, the
Yeah.
greenways, trails, et cetera. So some of those conversions, like the Mona Trail, the B&O Trail, the Pensy Trail, all of those are rail-to-trail projects that have been pretty successful.
Yeah, once we get it, though, it shouldn't have, you're talking about the actual railroad where those are.
Yeah, I'm
I
talking
know
about
what you're
mowing their
talking about.
tracks.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
had Ted's familiar with it. It's the Triangle Park over at King and Holmes.
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, Michigan and Holmes. And there was a group of about 5 of us that spent 5 days over there. And I mean, it was a huge project that, we just felt so good when it was done. And then we got a real CSX person out there that said, we're gonna take it over and
Couldn't do it.
No, so far.
no.
I'd be willing to try to go up some rabbit holes, go down some rabbit holes with you to see what we could do.
I appreciate
on
that.
one.
Well, now, the ones in our neighborhood, me and Jim cut all the ones in our neighborhood because it just makes us crazy. You know, it's nice to be able to look on Harris and look all the way downtown and be able to see all the way downtown. Because it hasn't always been like that. So it's kind of like you get the attitude, if it bothers you, you better do something about it because they're not home.
Maybe the media could help put a spotlight on that.
We've done that too. You can't shame them. You just can't shame them. Yeah, they go home at 5 o'clock, you know, they don't care. They don't care. But Ted, I will take you up on that. Thank you.
Nancy, did you want to ask any questions in the neighborhood?
Sure.
What neighborhood?
My name's Nancy Lacey, I'm in the Martin Highway neighborhood, and from a neighbor standpoint, I have to ask, who is accountable when your neighborhood, when your community organizations stop communicating with the community? That all of the life plans where we hear all this great stuff about what's going on, and then we sign up to be communicated with and keep in contact. Who is accountable then, once you've gone through everybody who's supposed to be on the ground level that you talk to? Who is accountable then after that?
I say follow the money
So-
trail. Go ahead,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, I mean, that's a good there's not a really governance accountability structure that's set into the way that the city works with neighborhood organizations.
Well, I
But,
figure this is a think tank, maybe we could think of some
Well,
ideas.
what we've seen happen in other places is old leadership, as it changes and doesn't do so much, new leadership creates itself. And then there's conflict when that happens. There's certainly going to be a time of conflict. But
Sometimes that's what has to
then the
happen.
new leadership solves the problem that you had. And it's sort of like, I was in a thing earlier, it's like, oh no, actually what one of the mayor candidates said, it's not a top-down thing. It's got to come from the neighborhood. Because I guarantee it wouldn't be any good for the city to come and say, you know, you guys aren't communicating to the rest of your neighborhood. It just wouldn't take that well. So create new leadership, struggle through it, and you'll probably be stronger in the long run.
Well, see, the problem that I have with that approach is that in the meantime, you're losing the people who have supported you to the point when you stop communicating with your neighbors. So then after a certain point, you realize really, there's really not much of anything getting done in your neighborhood because no one in these organizations that are supposed to be helping you in your community are actually communicating with you. And then if you actually go to one of their meetings, they say, well, we need more community support. Well, if you need more community support, don't you think you need to be getting out to the community, do some door knocking, do something? When I suggest maybe going around to a door-to-door campaign, they act like they're scared of their own community. So these people are able to operate in this bubble because nobody wants to come to you because you're not coming out to them. It's like a
Cycle.
a vicious cycle
cycle.
of nothing getting done because no one is communicating.
So this isn't going to directly answer your question, but I'm going to sort of tail off of something that Maury said. And we talked about the Indy funding grants that INHP gives to nonprofits and CDCs across Marion County. So we have opportunity to look at quite a few nonprofit organizations, more specifically CDCs. And I can tell you the one thing that separates the high-performing organizations from the low-performing organizations is leadership. It's leadership in two levels. One is certainly your executive director, but two is your board, right? And so the board is accountable to the community. So if your community is not happy with the performance of that organization, then you need to get a real upswell from your community to go to those board meetings and hold that board accountable. So as much as you want to hold an executive director accountable, ultimately it's the board who hires that executive director, and an executive director answers to that board. So it's a matter of changing the leadership within that board is what really has to happen if you want that organization to go forward and really represent your community.
Can I add something to that, which is, so we're actually representing organizations that look at, that the unit of our work is actually neighborhoods. So we see neighborhoods as a whole. That's the unit, right? Now, neighborhoods are really complex. There's lots of people, there's churches, there's businesses, there's community centers, it's very complex. There's lots of different leadership components of that. But in some way or another, INHP is looking at a neighborhood. Let's call it Martin Brightwood or Northeast Corridor or whatever. And what you really want as a funder or somebody that wants to improve those neighborhoods is you really actually want leadership, which is what was already said, but you also want unity. You want to have a sense that people actually are talking to each other at the neighborhood level, figuring stuff out at the neighborhood level, and then acting as a united front to the funding community or the leadership of the city or whatever. That's really important. And so as you transition from one organization to the other, as Maura was saying, it's still important to try to, as much as possible, create a united front to the folks that are supporting you, if that makes sense. Keep the laundry and the baggage and all of that, try to keep it in-house in the neighborhood and not, so that you don't, because, we're just people too, and like there's, you just hear things and, yeah, so. That's my advice. Does that make any sense? Do that?
We were just talking about, John, going to board members. I have, in my neighborhood, board people know me very well.
So you've done all the things you're talking about already.
Yes, and we're still nowhere with the communication department, right? Still.
So I'd say just find alternate ways of leadership within that and keep that very positive, very solid, very consistent over time. And that is basically Maura's answer.
Go around. Right, does the work have to be, are there other kind of leadership groups that you already have in place in the community that can really strengthen and become a more powerful lever and keep moving and getting some work done?
It's just like I said, everything that you've said so far, I've done. I'm not new with this. I've been working in my community since 2007. We are still having the same problem communicating with our community. There are too many people in our community who don't even know our community organizations even exist. So who is responsible for that?
You, start with you.
And that's what I'm saying. If I'm going, I can't be the only one going out saying that we have these community organizations and you need to go to this meeting about code enforcement, you need to go to this meeting about education. I can't be the only one.
Is there anyone else that feels the same way that you do? I mean, like, do you have allies that can help you?
Like I said, we have been, as I said, been on this little hamster wheel since 2007. None of the things that we're doing right now.
Excuse me, Lacey, could you give me your phone number, please?
Oh, sure.
Did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna. Choose one. Just make a statement. We had some of the same problems in the United Northeast CDC district, and we actually just exited off the board this year. But my neighbors, the people across the street from me, down the street, have been saying the same thing. We don't know, who are you? You know, who is that? What do you do? We don't see you doing anything. So several of us decided to talk to the different neighborhood organizations within our area. And we have come together with 5 of the neighborhood organizations now under one name. We're calling ourselves KIP Plus, which is Knowledge is Power Plus, the Plus. And it's really working. And what we decided to do, let United Northeast do what they do and some of the other larger groups. But we are actually knocking on doors and doing things with the neighbors. We're having a senior technology day, inviting all the seniors out so we can teach them how to use their iPads and their phones and that kind of thing. We have a Christmas celebration that we're organizing, and we have 2 girls and young girls and young guys and young boys organization that we're organizing. So we have 4 things on the table right now that the neighbors are interested in. They don't know what the CDC is. They don't even care. But if it affects them personally, and they can see that you're actually doing something, it really is helping. So we're finding that we're really breaking through some of these barriers and getting people to come out and really want to help us. So I still believe in what the CDC does and some of the other agencies, but they're just agencies. You know, they're not my neighbor next door across the street.
Lee, did you have something you were?
Yeah, I was just going to offer the suggestion of working similar to what the woman mentioned, but working in your block and maybe using the resource of Keep Indianapolis Beautiful to actually adopt a block and start planting trees and getting people to come out together to clean up that individual block. And when other people see that low-hanging fruit is being addressed, and maybe they will start to join you in having maybe 1 or 2 social activities where you get people together in your backyard or your front yard or on that block and continue those conversations and continue to build that community, which then demonstrates the unity that Ted was mentioning and raises the awareness of your elected officials. And so I'm not sure if you have a conversation with your city councilman, but just continuing to use them as an advocate for you to work on behalf of your block and then your neighborhood, and then possibly eventually getting that CDC's leadership change with a stronger board of directors.
Well, for me, it's not so much the CDCs, but we have other neighborhood organizations that are working in our neighborhood that have set up shop in our neighborhood, but what are you doing if we're not doing it? So it's not always so much the CDCs that I'm looking at. It's like the different little neighborhood organizations. It's the, that put together our quality, especially those that come together to put together our quality of life plans. If after so many meetings you stop communicating with, you suddenly drop off the communication list after so long, maybe they might have heard you mention a couple of things that don't go along with what they're trying to do right now. You might have a little bit of a dissenting opinion. That is not a reason to be dropped off the list. That is, those type of things are left. How do you claim that you want to be an all-inclusive community, but as soon as you get to a certain point, you stop communicating with the community, even those who have already been involved. And especially like if you started with something like I started with the Northeast Corridor Education Committee, and you start with a committee and you've been there and you've contributed and you've been working on it, and then all of a sudden, no communication. Nothing. You contact the people you've been contacted with and they don't get back to you. As a person with other things to do, I'm not going to keep on. If I've already been with you and I've started with you and I've been working with you, and all of a sudden you're the one to stop communicating with me. I'm not the one to stop communicating with you. That's a problem.
Well, the old adage is, you can't control somebody else, you can only control what you can do. So them not communicating you're gonna have to do something different and create your own communication, because they're not gonna change.
Just on that note, so I do think every neighborhood is different, so there are different ways that people come together, different governance structures, right? So So a quality of life plan area, for example, sometimes those areas have these quarterly meetings. They're called, in the mid-north area, it's called the CAN.
Yes.
Citizen Action Network.
Yeah.
I believe. In the southeast neighborhood, it's called Congress. In the northeast, it's called a assembly. In the near east side, it's called a summit. But what they are quarterly updates, right? Just check-ins for people to gather. And I would make sure to really utilize those and be smart about it. It's only 4 times a year, and make sure that you are there, but also your issues are up front in those kind of systems of communications. Because the emails, it's tough to stay on all the email chains and stuff like that.
Quality of life plans are there
So, depending on which one you count, but there are 9, yeah.
How many
quality of life plans?
There are 9, and then there's a current one that's organizing in the south side of Indianapolis with UND.
List quality of life plans, because one of my questions was, there's actually 2 quality of life plans in the Martindale-Brightwood neighborhood. They were part of the Northeast Quarter Quality of Life. They had their own quality of life plan. Their own quality of life plan had something called One Voice that was supposed to be representing the entire neighborhood, which my guess is that's probably where you're experiencing the challenge, because I haven't heard a similar thing about the Northeast Quarter Quality of Life plan process. So that makes it difficult. In Martindale-Brightwood, there's a lot going
Especially in
on.
Martindale-Brightwood, in the past 3 town hall meetings, they have had sign-up sheets if you want to be involved in any of the areas of One Voice. If you wanted to be involved in there, you sign up. I went to about 3 different town hall meetings where I've signed up, and I've never got never got anything. And some of these people who are on the board of One Voice are people who I have known since 2007, and they know that I have been involved personally. So the way I see it is, if you're not even communicating with the residents of your community who you know are involved and invested in their community, how are you going to get other people involved? How's a person like myself supposed to back you and say that other people need to be involved when I can't even tell you when the next meeting is going to be because nobody contacts me? And then yet, we have these same people who are still funding, they want the funding to continue for what they're trying to do, but you're not communicating with the neighborhood that you're supposed to be getting this funding to work for, to work with them. That to me is the most nerve-wracking thing to be involved with my community.
Is there traction with the Northeast Corridor?
I would know that if they were ever letting me in on the meetings.
Maybe you can talk after you said you're with Northeast. Yeah, you guys can talk after the session.
Okay.
All right, do you have a question?
Yeah, Michelle and I live in Fountain Square.
Thank you.
We've gone through a lot of changes in the last couple of years. I read an article about a town in Texas that they created like a land trust where like the community owns a handful of properties and they keep them as rentals and have like locked in the rental rate for like 99 years or something. We have a lot of renters in the neighborhood that have been there for like decades and they are slowly getting pushed out. I was wondering how would you even start something like that?
Maybe repeat the question louder.
In Fountain Square, going through gentrification, I heard about a town in Texas that the community acquired a land trust where they own a handful of rental units and they locked in the rental rate for like 99 years to be able to retain renters that have been there for decades that are committed to their community, because we have renters that have been in Fountain Square for years. They live there, they work there, they're very involved, but they are getting pushed out of the neighborhood. And so I was curious of how to start, if that was a possible thing to do, and how to get the ball rolling on that.
What? Go ahead.
Hey, you go ahead, Mark.
Well, sure, it's possible, because it requires a local ordinance to do something. There's a number of ways to do things like that. So local ordinance means start with your city county councilor, and then they would want to research ideas on how to do it. Some cities have Well, okay, we have the Indianapolis Housing Agency, so they do provide housing and rent subsidy, and I don't know exactly how it works, but we have that agency here already. But other things like what you're talking about are, some zoning ordinances require that developers, when they develop market rate housing, also provide some affordable housing. We don't have that here, and that would probably be very hard to get because our affordability is generally low compared to most cities, to tell you the truth. You know, we have the most affordable housing, I think, in the country, don't we, something like that. But so you'd start with your counselor, but I think it'll be very difficult. I don't want to give you a rosy, but you found Square, so that's Jeff Miller, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add that, so this affordable housing component, the gentrification, we think about this all the time, and we're working on all kinds of different things. There's a model we're exploring with Riley Area Development and Big Par to try to create a different model of affordable housing that'll, you know, a lot of times we talk affordable housing, we're talking rental. But with this, it's a concept where somebody could, it's really geared more towards the artist right now, but it's something that would be more pilot that we could potentially look at other ways of doing it. But the concept just basically being you can buy in at a certain rate, you have a certain percentage of the ownership, and another entity has a certain percentage of the ownership, so you can keep it very affordable for that person. When they sell, they can get a little bit of upside, not a lot of upside, but a little bit of upside, but it sells again to somebody in a similar situation, affordable person. So you're trying to keep that affordability long-term. Very early stages, but I think there's a lot of conversations happening across Indianapolis right now trying to figure these kinds of things out. So I'll give you my card and reach out to me, and I can kind of give you some more information about what we're thinking about right now.
I mean, on a very high level, the CDBG, so Community Development Block Grants that come from the feds, and then our entitlement funds that come to the city, those are basically anti-gentrification tools because they lock in affordability for if there's a housing project that affordable housing, there are certain criteria that's required to meet related to that. So in some ways there are tools. Affordable housing is another one. So in Fountain Square, the main development that started the ball rolling on Fountain Square was in 1993. There was a senior tax credit project right above the library there at the corner, right? And so that still is affordable, right in the downtown of Fountain Square, right? You know, so you just need to think about and make sure to work with your CDC, Southeast Neighborhood Development, maybe to think about other ways to keep that affordability mix as part of Fountain Square.
A rich neighborhood really needs all aspects of society.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, I mean, we have so many restaurants.
I mean, rich not meaning money, you need that.
Well, the great thing about Fountain Square is that there are actually jobs there that people can, right?
And almost everybody that works in those restaurants lives in the neighborhood, but in about 3 more years, it's not going to be possible.
But I will say that if you go to Fountain Square, that you can still go a block and a half away from the Prospect in Virginia and find homes that are relatively inexpensive. So that there's not...
Quickly
Have
changing.
you had any conversations with SEND, with Southeast Neighborhood Development?
Not yet. I hear things from other people that send us in a different kind of position these days here.
There's something to that. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I'd still encourage you to reach out to Paul Smith just to talk about, if you have a CDC that's working in your area, they likely can get a traction a little more quicker than maybe you could individually. So I would check with SEND, and if you run into a roadblock, then come to me and we'll see what we're looking at.
I don't know if this is off topic, but this certainly is involves Indianapolis neighborhoods. According to the Indiana Youth Institute, juvenile delinquency rates and juvenile crime has gone up. And juvenile caseloads have gone up 13% since 2010, up from approximately 3,800 cases up to 4,300 cases per year in Marion County. That's an indicator of disengaged youth and degradation of other communities and neighborhoods. I didn't know that the think tanks had relevant statistics or if you were aware of that statistic.
I think there's some of the young adults in here.
Well, here, I'm with Shepherd Community Center on the Near East Side, and currently working with a family who has, for the last several weeks, been desperately trying to find help for their 13-year-old son before he kills himself or gets killed. And it's basically impossible to find anybody, any group, anything to take the kid to work with. So, especially for people in poor neighborhoods that don't have financial means, to find a place to send a child for any kind of rehab, not like just drug rehab, but any kind of rehab, any kind of home, residential-based facility, it's next to impossible. And the juvenile department won't take them unless they commit a serious crime. And so there's just not much out there for parents to be able to do, many resources for them with their kids. When you have a kid who's really getting himself in trouble and nothing really can be done about it.
My question would be, why isn't the child connected to his learning experience?
He was suspended from school, for a week, a couple of weeks ago, for issues, but like, they suspend him when he comes back, and there's not much else that they can do. He goes to partial.
There are no charges.
Right, I mean, we're a church, we're assisting, but like, there's only so much, like, the kid himself is not responding to anything the parents do. The parents come to us and say, well, they first went to juvenile and say, can you take him? And they said, no. But, so they came to us to say, we need help. He's gonna get himself hurt. And so we've tried to contact, people in the city, the state, private organizations, and there isn't much out there for kids unless you can pay $2,500 a month to send them to a residential facility, which people in most of our neighborhoods can't afford to pay. So that's one of the reasons why there's so much delinquency is parents can't do much with their kids. The kids get in trouble, the police take them back home to the parents.
So this isn't my area, but I do know that Marion County Commission on Youth, so McCoy, John Brandon, they used to publish a little booklet that had probably over 100 organizations.
It's downstairs, actually.
And
It's
so-
an activity directory.
So I don't know if you've exhausted all those resources in there, but there may be something to that. But to the larger question, I agree.
So my question from that is like, what can we do since we know that there is a deficit, right? And so as a nation, we are known to be reactive instead of proactive. And there is enough, like in the class that I went to this morning, there is enough resources in this entire building with just this conference that we can be proactive. And so my question is how can we establish something since everything is a reactive program, facilities, I've worked at them, I dealt with them, don't care for them, but that's another conversation. And so, but I would say what can we do to create proactive programs for youth such as in this young man's situation. And for you, I have my card and I would like to talk to you about that young man, and so that's what I would like to say is just what can we do to create more programming to being proactive and stuff that is really funded in a way that is sustainable and renewable and not just something that we're just going to do for a short period of time and then it's over, and so when the needs are continual. And so that was my question to you all. What are some of those things that we can do in our individual neighborhoods or
If we're talking about neighborhoods, so I know that in the Northeast Corridor, they had an action team, they still do, called Youth Engagement. And as part of that effort, they have a gentleman, what's his name, Robert? I forget his last name. So they took a neighborhood team of youth to a national constitutional competition. What's his last name?
Wells.
Robert Wells, incredible gentleman. Point being is, the Northeast Quality of Life brought some folks together. Those people were really engaged. They found a framework. Now, this could be different in each neighborhood, right? The framework was youth engagement team. This was really important. They put it in their quality of life plan. They keep meeting. And then they, as a neighborhood, they actually sent a team of youth to this national constitutional competition. That was really inspiring. That was actually one of the big successes out of that quality of life plan to me, because it just was unusual. It wasn't housing, right? It wasn't infrastructure, but it was youth. And I think you could do that in each one of these neighborhoods, but it does take organized, consistent effort over time by engaged people. I mean, that's the
Well, and I think, in addition to kind of the directory and resources that McCoy has, they've also got a huge network of providers of youth programming, as well as, position papers on, where to find additional resources for youth employment, for instance, or for ways that schools can best intervene, which might not be suspending a child, but looking at other alternative options. They're a wealth that I would make sure that we look into as well.
Back to what?
No one had 80 there before me.
Okay, and we have to wrap this up in about 2 minutes.
I have one.
You get one first, or?
I was just gonna say, in my personal opinion, I think it's going back to how we here talk about